This is a peak anime that every Minecraft player must watch. Do you know who created Steve? I believe many people would say it's Notch, but actually Notch is just one of the original founders of Minecraft. The programmer with yellow hair is the one who truly created Steve. One morning, the programmer discovered that Steve had gained consciousness, which was truly amazing. After all, at that time the block world was completely controlled by the hen, and although many players entered the game, they could be kicked out by the hen at any time. In excitement, the programmer communicated with Steve both inside and outside the screen. Steve seemed to know that the programmer had no malicious intent, and he friendly reached out his hand. And so, the two blocky figures, one big and one small, high-fived for the first time across the screen. After establishing friendship, the programmer began to create a perfect block world for Steve. This way, Steve could live carefree in this space. Perhaps fearing Steve's loneliness, the programmer added all kinds of creatures to accompany him. But the most lovable of them all was the wolf, which Steve easily tamed with a bone. Unfortunately, as the dark force in the block world, the hen would not let Steve develop like this. Just when Steve was having a great time playing with the wolf, the sky suddenly darkened. Before the little wolf and Steve could react, a horde of zombies appeared nearby. Luckily, the programmer was right by the computer at that moment, and he easily brought a shotgun for Steve. The fierce zombies were no match for the shotgun, and even if a zombie managed to get close to Steve, it couldn't withstand the damage from the diamond sword. With the help of the author and the little wolf, Steve managed to deal with the zombies and skeleton archers. Although an Ender Dragon also joined the monster camp, the little wolf was not afraid of it at all. Faced with the much larger Ender Dragon, the little wolf roared in anger. The programmer enlarged the little wolf to the same size as the Ender Dragon. With the help of the programmer, this pair of companions became almost invincible. Before long, they decisively defeated all the enemies. Even the powerful Ender Dragon was completely eliminated by the enlarged little wolf. Just as Steve was about to wash up by the river after the battle, a terrifying scene unfolded. In the reflection in the river water, Steve saw the wide-eyed hen. Continuing from last time, Steve discovered that his reflection in the river was that of the hen. At the same time, a virus invaded the programmer's computer, meaning the programmer could no longer help Steve. All tools were frozen, and Steve cautiously picked up the shotgun. With the programmer unable to assist him, he had to be extremely careful. As lightning struck, No appeared near Steve, making everyone nervous, as No was extremely powerful. Let me introduce you to No, a strange creature completely clad in black. He has always followed the hen and is the most loyal member of the Undead Legion. With eyes as pale as the hen's, he is also known as the Shadow of the Hen. The sword in No's hand can freeze all creatures in the block world. Very dangerous. Steve was no match for him, so he fled in panic, running into a small forest by the river, a place to hide from No's pale eyes. Indeed, with Steve's trail lost, No had to venture into the forest to search, and the direction he was searching was right where Steve was hiding. Steve would surely be found at this rate. At the critical moment, the little wolf suddenly appeared, diverting No's attention, allowing Steve to severely injure No with an arrow. After No fled, the programmer's computer returned to normal. Just as everyone was about to be happy, they suddenly noticed something was off with Steve's expression. It turned out that the little wolf, who had distracted No, was now on the brink of death. Unable to bear the sadness, Steve knelt down and held the little wolf in his arms. Although they had only known each other for a short time, the little wolf was willing to sacrifice its life for him. Despite trying to lift its head to look at Steve one last time, the little wolf had no strength left and died in Steve's embrace. The scene changed, and Steve had already buried the little wolf. Leaning on the diamond sword, he lowered his head to mourn the little wolf. This bleak scene saddened the programmer and his friends deeply, to the point where they couldn't bear to watch. Steve, looking at the bones on the little wolf's grave, made up his mind to avenge the little wolf. The hen, who had sent No to eliminate Steve, didn't care about Steve at all. Continuing from last time, after the little wolf sacrificed himself to protect Steve, the programmer also started to realize that he couldn't protect Steve alone. So he called a friend for help, and the friend who was on vacation immediately took a plane to join the programmer. Thus, the two friends decided to train Steve into a powerful blocky character, and Steve understood that he needed strength. To help Steve on his journey, the programmer even turned villagers into helicopters. Many players also started entering the game to adventure with Steve, growing to love this character, living in the block world more and more. Through the adventures with the players, Steve slowly began to accept these friends, except for this one noob who kept bullying him, which was really annoying. Soon, Steve discovered a cave that might contain the hen, but apart from a giant crystal in the cave, there was nothing else. Just when Steve felt it was a wasted trip, the computer crashed again. Afterwards, Steve's reflection in the crystal turned into the hen, and the hen shattered the crystal with a punch, sending Steve flying. Next was the first showdown between Steve and the hen. Who do you think will win? I won't comment on this battle. You can discuss who is more powerful. Their lives have been taken lawfully. The soul of a warrior never dies. The people of Demacia never retreat. The will to charge forward is unyielding. Even if outnumbered, this general can still decapitate the enemy commander among 1,000 troops. Destiny has made its choice. In the end, Steve was defeated by the hen with a flying kick. Having to admit that the hen from the Undead Legion was so powerful that resistance was futile. But Steve was not afraid. He had long sensed this outcome. When the hen saw Steve's life-saving pile of salted fish, he couldn't help but want to laugh, not realizing that the CPU temperature of the computer was rising. Steve didn't use the salted fish to defeat the hen, but to use a large amount of idle fish to force the computer to malfunction. When the salted fish reached a certain quantity, the computer wouldn't be able to handle it, causing a crash, allowing Steve to escape from under the hen's control. Continuing from last time, Steve ultimately lost to the hen, but at the critical moment, he used the salted fish technique to force the computer to stop working. When Steve woke up, he found himself at the core of the computer system. Although he was just a blocky person who knew nothing about computers, Steve successfully repaired the computer crash with his sixth sense. The programmers on the other side thought they would never see Steve again, but they were surprised to find the computer back to normal. After restoring the software, they discovered Steve reappeared. Even the wolves were resurrected by a system loophole. The newly healed No returned to the cave, looking majestic as ever. He truly is the visual representative of the Undead Legion. No approached the crystal, wondering why it was restored to its original state. When No turned around, we could see all the members of the Undead Legion behind him. The Undead Legion clearly had big plans, but the players in the main city were completely unaware, enjoying themselves without any vigilance, unaware that danger was quietly approaching. Sure enough, Hen appeared, this time followed by 4 powerful members of the Undead Legion. It seems that Hem has decided to launch an attack on the player's main city. Hem approached the crystal and smashed it with a single punch. After the crystal cracked, a powerful force within it formed a teleportation field. All the members of the Undead Legion, led by Hem, hand in hand, entered the teleportation field. Pay attention, the next scene is the most majestic moment of the Undead Legion. Under the puzzled gaze of all the players in the main city, the teleportation field slowly appeared. And the members of the Undead Legion instantly appeared in front of these players like gods. In fact, the players now had no power to resist the Undead Legion. Under the attack of the Undead Legion, players crazily ran away, not even daring to think about resistance. Well, after all, how can mere mortals fight against gods? The Undead Legion easily took over the main city that belonged to the players. So can the programmers and Steve help the players defeat the Undead Legion? We will continue this in the next episode. Pay attention. The next scene is the most majestic moment of the Undead Legion. Led by Hen, the entire Undead Legion launched an attack and effortlessly took over the players' server main city. This scene plunged most players into despair. Faced with such a powerful Undead Legion, do players really have a chance to reclaim the main city? After taking over the main city, Hen chose a location as the temporary base of the Undead Legion, and you can see why so many players like the Undead Legion. Although they are the villains, they are truly the most handsome team in my world. On the other side, the programmers and their teammates were still fighting against the monsters in the main city, but they were sent by Hen to eliminate them. They knew they were no match for Hen, so they decided to quit the game. After quitting the game, the programmers hurried to seek help from Steve. At that moment, Steve was peacefully sleeping in a rocking chair, and no matter what the programmers did, they couldn't wake him up. Even when they tried to use a bone to wake Steve up, they were stopped by a baby wolf. Just then, a newbie came to the programmer's side. Seeing how difficult it was for them to wake Steve up, the newbie immediately said, "Let me do it." The newbie was a man of few words. He took the computer and summoned a salted fish, then used the mouse to enlarge the salted fish. With a gradually twisted expression, the salted fish even surpassed the entire server map. Steve felt that something was wrong and woke up. When he saw the salted fish in the sky, he was stunned. At this moment, I was thinking, why didn't the newbie just use the salted fish to attack the Undead Legion's base? With such a powerful salted fish, even Hen would probably struggle to resist. Just as the newbie was about to control the salted fish to hit Steve, the programmers quickly grabbed the mouse. Saving Steve from a disaster. The author then showed Steve the images of the server being invaded. When Steve saw the Undead Legion invading the player's main city with monsters, he became serious. For Steve, the players were his best friends, especially since No had once defeated the baby wolf. Steve arrived at his house and pushed open the wooden door, finding a clock that hadn't been used in a long time in the corner. This time, in order to save all the players, Steve had to confront the entire Undead Legion. When Steve saw the pictures of the players being invaded by the Undead Legion, his expression became serious. And so, in order to save all players, even though he knew they weren't enemies, Steve resolutely picked up his weapon and embarked on his journey. For Steve, players are his best friends, and not even the Undead Legion can harm them. As Steve was about to leave, the little wolf looked back at him reluctantly. They both knew that Steve was about to face the entire Undead Legion, and he might never come back. After bidding farewell to the wolf, Steve set off again, vowing to eliminate the entire Undead Legion. As the bright light of the portal appeared, Steve arrived at the server's main city that had already been invaded by the Undead Legion. To his surprise, 4 members of the Undead Legion were lying in ambush, and Steve was caught off guard and knocked unconscious. Entity 303 and the Fearful Warlock were dragging Steve towards the Undead Legion's base, while another protagonist was about to make an entrance. Entity 303 and the Fearful Warlock had no idea that there were players assisting them from the shadows, and they were completely unprepared. Thankfully, the Death Knight responsible for reconnaissance noticed something unusual, prompting the Fearful Warlock and the others to temporarily release Steve and prepare to deal with the hidden enemies. As the Death Knight next to him reacted, Alex appeared above him and swiftly struck him down with a sword. Oh my goodness, Alex is ruthless! He appeared and took out the Death Knight in an instant, showing no fear against the Fearful Warlock and Entity 303. He then stood guard protectively in front of Steve. If it weren't for his need to protect Steve, I feel like the Fearful Warlock and Entity 303 would have been taken out by Alex. Seeing Entity 303 fleeing directly, the Fearful Warlock followed suit, afraid of being taken out by Alex. Alex looked at the unconscious Steve, feeling a bit of a headache. He may be a pro at fighting, but he wasn't sure about saving people. After hesitating for a moment, Alex took out healing potions, golden apples, and cacti from his backpack. After some consideration, the clever Alex used the cactus to wake Steve up. Steve exclaimed, "You're such a pain, why couldn't you just use a healing potion or golden apple?" Indeed, the thought process of the Valkyrie Alex is quite different from that of an ordinary person.